Hi, everyone. I'm Jam Khan, VP of Product Marketing for Seismic, and I am here today to talk to you all about immersive content experiences that sellers love. It's a pretty ambitious topic, knowing the audience here, so I appreciate everyone tuning in for this, and I hope we're able to cover some pretty interesting topics here. If there's one thing I'm going to leave everyone with here, it's the idea that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. I know there's a lot of folks here who are quite adept at content creation, so I'm not going to sit here and be giving a master class on how to create content, but it's more a discussion around how you can make that content into something that your sellers will love, that your buyers will engage with. It's going to drive the kind of attention that you feel your content deserves. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the experience economy, because that drives a lot of thought process here today. The term the experience economy was first used in an HBR article back in 1998 by Joseph Pine and James Gilmore. And it described the experience economy as the next economy, following the agrarian economy and the industrial economy and the most recent service economy. Now, Pine and Gilmore argue that businesses must orchestrate memorable events for customers, and that the memory itself becomes the product, the experience, as it were. While this term was introduced over 20 years ago, it really feels like technology and circumstance have truly brought this to the forefront here in 2020, a year where all notions of being digital are being pushed to the forefront. So the question we have to ask ourselves when you go to market is how to motivate buyer engagement in a time when attention spans are short, buyers are overwhelmed with content overload, and sellers are wary of creating content fatigue. Now, sales and marketing teams ultimately want to inspire a buyer to engage and act, to deliver timely and relevant buyer experiences. And they're doing so while being acutely aware of the fact that the volume of content being published today is overwhelming. According to YouTube's official blog, over 500 hours of video are uploaded each minute. 70 million posts are published on WordPress monthly. So it's hard to stand out. If you think about, how you want to build great content, you have to consider the fundamental building blocks. Will this message stand out, not just in what I say, but how I say it? See, it's not enough just to have a good story to tell. Unlike a book, in this case, as sellers and as marketers, we're trying to educate a buyer. We're trying to connect with them by showing empathy. We're trying to create value. But first, we have to get their attention and give them a real reason to engage. And the content we have to create has to be easy to use, easy for us to create. Otherwise, it never makes it off the proverbial bookshelf, right? It remains an idea waiting to be acted upon. You've got to be able to tell your stories in a practical way and create these immersive stories in a way that actually supports what generally is a resource-constrained marketing team and a very overwhelmed sales team. And lastly, we need to flip the conversation and allow the buyer to be a part of this story. Let's not assume that we know what the buyer wants, even when the buyer often doesn't really know what they want themselves. Let's give them what they need. Let's give them a way to determine their own path. Let's present them with options. It allows the buyer to feel like they aren't being marketed to, they aren't being sold to, but they're part of the conversation. And when creating content, that's not often the mindset that we have. We think about how we want to push our message out. We think about how we want to deliver an engaging story. And that's not just true in how we create content, it's also very true in how we deliver content. So let's talk for a moment about the means that we use today to engage. There's a massive weak link. We're getting better and better about being choiceful about the stories we tell, or we're trying to tell more thought leadership type of stories. We're trying to educate our customers, but the way we deliver these stories ultimately fall flat. They're consumed in a very linear and static fashion, and all the storytelling prowess loses its significant punch. And this problem is even more acute in a remote selling world where all of our content is delivered electronically. It's not face-to-face where we can rely on the engagement of a person looking across the room and talking to the audience, making sure that they're engaged, pivoting if they aren't. A lot of our messages today are delivered electronically. How often do you have a conversation where your prospect, your buyer will say, Can you send that presentation over, send those slides over, send me a piece of content. And now it gets exported to some sort of static format like a PDF, shipped over, and the buyer is consuming them in a very sequential fashion. They're following, a set of steps that you've assumed are the right ones. They're not really part of the conversation. They're not really engaging. Now let's think about our audience at large. Right? However you visualize your funnel, and I know it's the classic case of a marketing funnel that follows this nice sort of pyramid isn't really the case, that the journey is far more complex. But it is useful to think of it in a broad level as two types of audiences, one-to-many and one-to-one. The former is when we produce a lot of our evergreen thought leadership, sort of classic top of funnel content. We want buyers at large to consume these at their convenience, on their terms, but we also want them to experience it. We want them to immerse themselves and be able to pick their own adventure, choose the parts that are interesting to them. Again, we want the buyer to engage. And then as you get further along the journey where the buyer shows more interest, that's when your experiences and your content needs to be a little more tailored, be more personalized, speak directly to a smaller set, maybe even 1 to 5 buyers. And you have to think about creating content for all those scenarios, but you have to think about the immersive aspect in each of those situations. Furthermore, let's think about the way we always talk about this journey. We talk about the buyer's journey. It's a very common phrase that's used, and it's somewhat of a presumptuous view of things. A journey typically assumes some sort of inevitable destination, which means that you assume that the buyer is somehow trying to find their way to you. That in and of itself is a very presumptuous way to approach the problem. The buyer is looking for a great experience. They're looking for somebody who feels like they understand their problems and can resonate with them and deliver some sort of value that's right for them at the right time. It's the sellers and the marketers that are actually on a journey. They're the ones that are trying to deliver the right content at the right time to the right person. So it's worth considering that the sales and marketing journey is what folks are on, and the buyer experience is what we need to deliver on. And when we develop our content, that's something you need to start thinking through as you develop not just the story, but you think about the medium in which you're delivering that story. And you consider the idea that it's a buyer experience. And actually, the journey the seller has to go through is not easy. Selling's never been easy, and it's harder now more than ever when all the natural motions of selling that involved so much of face-to-face interaction are off the table. So we start talking about the content we deliver, the stories we deliver. We have to factor in the medium that we are choosing to deliver them. And it's a reason why you see such a prevalence of animation and video, because it does stand out a little more than in a typical static content will, but it's still very one-directional. It's still you talking to the buyer and just hoping that a slightly more personal way via something like video, will engage them even more. It's not immersive. It doesn't quite suck the buyer in, and it doesn't certainly make the buyer a part of the conversation. So we want to introduce this concept of interactive content, this notion of a micro app that sort of replicates the experience that a really well-designed website does, but in a manner that allows you to tell your story. It allows you to put your content into a format that allows the buyer to effectively experience it. Click through it the way a well-designed website does. Allow them to go to the places that are of highest relevance to them. And the medium is as powerful as the message. So I'll let you just experience the short video and see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, when you're creating content, one thing that also stands out here is that there's research that indicates that 85% of buyers will dismiss the first interaction if they don't receive tailored information. And 90% of consumers admit that they prefer interactive and visual content. So you just saw this video. I think it probably resonated, quite engaging, I hope. If nothing else, the music's pretty good. But it does reinforce the fact that it's not just what you say, it's how you say it. And factoring that in, it's really important to understand the metrics you've put in place to make sure that you've got the right content, you're delivering the right content, these assumptions you've made about the right stories are actually hitting home. And so as you start thinking about data, right, which is a very key topic for a lot of marketers and more for sellers, we're all being increasingly data driven because we've got access to much more data than we've had in the past. But down at the bottom of the funnel, at that last mile, when opportunities turn into revenue, that's ironically where our visibility is the lowest. These are the stories that are winning your business. These interactions are a combination of conversations and content, and that balance is tilting in this sort of virtual world more and more towards content. So we need to be able to have better optics into those conversations, into that content. Are these new immersive stories now? Are they delivering the right message? Are buyers engaging more? Is that engagement turning into opportunity? Is that opportunity turning into business? It also lets you know how well your overall story is landing. So we all want to know what messages are working, which aren't. What's the impact my content's having on revenue? What content does my team need most? Or what are they using the most? What are my most effective sellers doing? What content are they using? How are they creating more immersive stories, and what's different in what they're doing versus others? Those kind of optic and insights are fundamental to be able to close the loop on creating engaging stories, creating immersive content, telling the story in a way that'll engage your buyer, but then being able to go back and actually measure the effectiveness of that story. That's when you get to go back and create this virtual circle of immersive content that sellers love, that buyers engage with, and that inform your business and make sure that you're telling the right stories, that it's informing your product direction. It all comes together, and what it does is it truly allows, by allowing your buyer to engage themselves in the conversation, it makes them part of your entire story. They're not just somebody you're telling a story to, but they're increasingly a part of your story. And by designing your content, using the tools that we're making available to deliver immersive experiences, you can actually have your buyer be very much a part of that conversation and be very much a part of your storytelling process. It's a fundamental mindset like shift in how we've created content, but it's one that's very, very relevant today in a virtual world and in a world where we're doing a lot of remote selling. But it's actually one that's been true for a long time. It's just one we've had to overcome, and we have overcome with personal interactions or face-to-face interactions, and hopefully those come back soon. But it doesn't change the fact that this has allowed us to think about how we deliver content in a different way and allow us to create content in a much more immersive and engaging way. I hope the session's been useful, and look forward to answering a few questions at the end of this.
All right, thanks, Jam. It's really great insight right there. Hello, everyone. My name's Rob Stella, and I'm on the product marketing team here at Seismic. Today, I'm going to give you a visual deep dive into our interactive content experience, and at the end, Jam will be able to answer any questions you have. So as Jam mentioned, we've taken a two-pronged approach to interactive content. We have what we call live content, and we also have micro apps. I'll show you each in just a moment. So we started down the path of interactive content as the future of where sales content could go. We don't believe that PowerPoints, PDFs, or Word docs are going anywhere anytime soon, but we also realize that the buyer experience is extremely important and differentiation is equally important. And from Seismic's perspective, content is meant to be consumed or engaged with, not just scrolled through. And the current business environment caused by COVID has really highlighted the importance of this because people can't meet face to face. So how do we enable sellers to provide a compelling, engaging buyer experience that compels their buyers to act outside of what's supported today with these standard PowerPoints and PDFs? And while you might not have the benefit of face-to-face interactions in order to build stronger relationships, you still need to provide your clients a compelling reason to stay engaged. And so interactive content has become an even more important and even more attractive piece to our customers. So with that, let's jump into the demo. So the first piece of content I want to show you here is a micro app. And I'm going to call out the video here in the background and the call to action or button here to let you get started or jump into the micro app. And you might notice this feels very much like a web page or app-like experience. We are able to embed different images that are rotating on a carousel. We have this navigation down here in the bottom, which really allows your buyer or your client, whoever you might be sharing this micro app, they can really choose their own adventure and decide what they want to look at and what they want to engage with. You can embed videos just like this, and you can really pack a lot of information into a small form factor. So you compare this to sending somebody a 100-page PDF versus receiving this micro app. I think it speaks for itself that this is a much better experience. And you'll see here, you can also embed things like forms within the micro app. So one of the beautiful parts of micro apps is that they're really built and integrated deeply into the Seismic platform. So right now I'm in the content manager and I'd be a marketer accessing this. You'll see that micro apps are a first-class citizen in the Seismic platform. So I can give my micro app a name. I can choose a thumbnail and also the form factor that I'd like to use as a starting point. I say starting point because micro apps are adaptive and they will adjust based off the device that your buyer client is using to access them. So now I'm going to just jump into the pre-built or the micro app we took a look at just a second ago. And what you'll see is that this design experience is very familiar to what your marketers or designers might have been using in the past. So over on the left-hand side, we have your slides or your pages, have these things called overlays, which add an extra element of interactivity. Then over here on the right, we have your tiles. So we have hotspots, which allows you to drag and drop these components that can add that interactivity and add that navigation to your micro app. There's also things like images and galleries, which are self-explanatory, and videos, but you also have the ability to add scrollable PDFs and embed things like web pages and Google Forms. And then down here in the bottom right, this is where you're able to upload your assets and ultimately drag and drop and stitch your interactive experience together. And when you get your micro app in a place that you feel comfortable with, you can preview it and see exactly how that micro app is going to behave. And then once you're feeling good, you can click done. And this is going to allow you to publish your micro app to your sellers so that they can share it with their buyers. So that's a micro app, and these micro apps are really meant for that high value flagship content that is meant to be used when marketing passes over leads to sales that have turned into opportunities. Next thing I'm going to show you here is a piece of live content. I'm going to jump into this interactive present mode. And you'll notice that on the surface, this looks very similar to a micro app. It has that web page, app-like experience, has a navigation built into it, rich animations, do some really cool things with the navigation overall. But one thing I really want to call it, if I go back to the very beginning of this, is that this has been personalized for both myself and also the prospect or customer that I'm interacting with. And that's really important because live content gets to leverage Seismic's personalization capabilities. So it gives your sellers kind of a easy way or wizard to personalize content. They could choose different slides or sections that they'd like to include, and then ultimately generate this and share a really highly personalized piece of content with their customers. Now, I think one of the big ta-da moments here is that this experience was all built with PowerPoint. And with PowerPoint, you're able to do this before, right? You're able to create these rich experiences and you can present out of PowerPoint. But think of yourself as being a seller, and you're either presenting in person or more likely nowadays, over Zoom or some sort of web conference. And you give a really great presentation, but what happens after that meeting? How do you follow up to that meeting? Well, you're not going to send over the PowerPoint most likely. What you're going to do is you're probably going to say file, share, send as a PDF, print a PDF and share, something like that. And we all know what those experiences look like, but let's just take a quick look. So here's that same PDF, all that rich interactivity, the navigation, it's all gone, all the rich media. You can't click on anything. So what was once a really engaging, immersive, interactive experience is now flat and static and linear. And going back to that idea that at Seismic, we believe content is meant to be engaged or consumed with, not just scrolled with. I think you'll see the value once we take a look at what it looks like when you're able to share this with the Seismic platform. So let's see what that looks like. So here I have those two pieces of content. I have that micro app and that piece of live content that I showed you just a second ago. And with Seismic, I can generate or send an email with a link that your buyers or customers can access. Here, I'm just going to copy this link, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So instead of sending a PDF, which is completely static, I'm able to send this link to my client. And it has all the interactivity that you saw within the native PowerPoint presentation, but now this all lives within the browser. They don't have to open up any other applications whatsoever, just launch them right into that presentation mode. And this is all made possible through Seismic Live content. And just to show you what micro apps look like in the same experience, just wanted to open this one up here too. So now also adding on with Seismic capabilities, Seismic's known for our robust analytics, which gives your sellers access to page-by-page analytics in terms of what content they're looking at. And that's going to really allow your sellers to drive the next interaction and know exactly where they should focus their conversations, while also informing your marketing team on what content is working and what's not working. So that's what I had prepared today. And with that, Jam, I'm going to pass it back to you. Thanks, everybody.
Video and audio. I'll type in the chat as well, but hopefully folks can hear me. If one of you in the chat can just confirm that. But I've heard about one question coming in is around legacy sellers that are not tech savvy. This is not meant to be for tech savvy. So the demo didn't quite get into the meat of all of this, but effectively a micro app allows a lot of drag and drop functionality that lets non-tech savvy content creators design their own experiences. So it's very conducive to setting up a menu-driven system and effectively replicate the experience that you have on a website. That a really well-designed website lets you come in there, immediately go to the areas that you want to navigate to, jump in and sort of pick your own adventure, as it were. And that's what a micro app or a piece of live content lets you do. The difference between the two are that micro apps are a little more immersive and interactive and more conducive to evergreen content. And then live content acts on existing slides. So it can take a set of Google slides or Microsoft presentations and convert them into this more immersive experience where you can deliver them as if they're in always presentation mode, and as designed as the interactivity that you build into the design of your PowerPoint. So a little bit of design work there, but it really, what it does is it takes all the authoring that you put into PowerPoint, but it lets you leverage that PowerPoint as more of an engagement tool than an authoring tool. And PowerPoint is really designed to be more of an authoring tool. This is designed to be more of an engagement tool. In terms of interactive PDF, there's a lot that it does that interactive PDF is not that great at. So you can embed, You can embed video, you can embed animation, any kind of rich media content can get embedded. It gives you all the design flexibility of PowerPoint, which typically is the language that marketers use to arm their sellers with. So it takes all of that sort of goodness, but it lets you deliver it. Take an example here. If I'm to send this presentation, and apologies, I think for some folks, maybe the slides as I was speaking didn't come through, so we can follow up and send this over to you. You'll see that typically somebody would export that to a PDF and send it over. In this case, I'll be able to send over a piece of live content that looks exactly as though I was showing you a presentation in always presentation mode. But I don't have to deliver a raw PowerPoint, which most folks won't do, right? To protect the content, you'll export it to a PDF. That's one of the things that immersive content aims to do. Wasn't sure. There's a question about the opt-in window around GDPR compliance. If you can just clarify the actual question over there. This doesn't sort of touch into GDPR at all, right? It's you would manage compliance and consent with your users as any other piece of content that you're sending them. This is more about the type of content you're sending over and the means you're using for delivery. The question about how much of this can be created or shared offline, all of it. I mean, this all can be created offline. For us, this entire capability lives within the Seismic platform, but you can send this as an attachment. And from the Seismic platform, we have mediums to use our live send capabilities, which adds the additional benefit of knowing exactly when your seller is engaged, how far along the presentation they went. So the same kind of tracking you do on your website to see what bounce rates are like and what parts of the a website they're engaging in. That's the same kind of information and insights that you can glean if you deliver this from within the Seismic platform. But you can also take this content and deliver it offline as well. Question here about extending this functionality to current customers, and this is available today. And every existing Seismic customer can use this, and any new ones. We released this as part of our summer launch earlier this year. So since August, this has been live. In terms of the receivers not having what they need to see it, no, live content gets exported to HTML5. So any browser that can render that can view it. So we haven't had any issues with being able to see it. And a micro app is self-contained, so you don't need any additional software tools to see it. If you are viewing it on mobile, there's an app to render the content, which gets delivered as part of the content delivery. So no issues with anybody consuming this content as long as you have a browser you can consume it. Question about whether this can be used for a light product walkthrough like an InVision. Absolutely. So one of the real use cases here is in education, which is much more conducive to immersive experience. We don't consume content in a linear fashion, and things like product walkthroughs, trainings. We use videos a lot, right? Like explainer and learner videos are awesome, but they are still very linear, right? They follow a specific path that you want to take a person on. I wouldn't look to replace those. They have their place as well. But sometimes you want somebody to get your story and just be able to go back, revisit it, and jump into the places that they want to. And things like training materials, learnings, manuals, product walkthroughs are just very, very conducive to micro apps. It's a question about the new normal of virtuality will accelerate the adoption of VR, AR as a mainstream content technique. I'm not quite sure where we end up as marketers with VR, AR. I still feel like that's more the realm of the gaming world. I do see immersive content like this being very much part of every marketer's playbook. And I think this was probably true even pre us moving to a almost entirely virtual motion, because oftentimes you rely a lot on those face-to-face interactions, but then the follow-through, right? When you have that inevitable Yeah, can you send me that deck? Can you send me that that presentation? Then all of that that dynamic experience that you've created face to face or via a one-on-one session, it gets lost when you have that leave behind, right? It still feels like we take a really big step back in the way we want to deliver our story. So I do see immersive content like this, interactive content, as being the new way of how marketers engage. It's when you start to experience it and you start looking at the content, it's sort of a no-brainer, right? You're looking at your prospects and not only just listening to what you're saying, but they're really consumed by how you're saying it, and everybody sort of feels like, hey, yeah, I want to do it this way as well. There's questions around creative companies and agencies. We have some partnerships that we have with with content creators for the creation of this. And I think, having most organizations have either an in-house or an out-house creative department. It's not a huge uplift to get trained on this. So I think it is a good best practice to work with both an external and an internal design team to have a few specialists trained in the creation of this. It's not a huge uplift, but there's always a learning curve to content creation. So once you can get that to scale, then you can start to just look at how you attack both the top of funnel, where you've got a lot of this like evergreen content that's conducive to micro apps, and then start prioritizing your bottom of funnel content, the ones that sellers are using the most. So we found things like pitch decks or your intro deck, right? The first set of the first engagement you're likely to have with a prospect. Producing that in live content is a really good way to engage them and ensure that the best outcome of a first meeting is to get a second meeting, and live content's really conducive to that. There's a question on software tools to create the interactive content. All of that lives within the Seismic platform. We don't need anything else. So live content sits there and acts on PowerPoint. So one of the beauties of it is it doesn't force a huge learning curve. Right? It allows you to work with a familiar tool. It allows you to leverage the familiarity of PowerPoint. Now, given how immersive you want to make it, you can add some additional design elements, right? You can add menu bars, and you can add more of a navigation feel, moving away from the very linear fashion that presentations often are designed in. But you work with a tool that you already know, and then our platform will convert it into live content. Micro apps are a separate tool that also all live within Seismic, but there's a wizard and a drag and drop functionality that allows, it's very conducive to very easily taking existing content and producing it in an immersive way. So the actual learning curve here is not very high. There was a question about recording how somebody interacts with your content, creating data on GDPR. Understood there. So this is no different from, right? Somebody is consuming your content. You're giving them via live sender. What you're really measuring is how far along their presentation, right? You consumed. Which number of slides did you go? What was the path you took? It's not so different from, right? Consuming content via website, right? When you go onto a website and you understand where somebody's gone, where they've gone to, where they hovered. So you don't have details about the person. You just have, right, they've already agreed to, by consuming your content, by accepting your email, downloading it, they've already agreed to consume it. You're really just getting insights into like what they consumed. You're not getting any additional personal information. Looking through if I missed any questions over here that came earlier. And I see comments around this being super cool. It really is. I mean, it's the beauty of this is that no matter what you're presenting or what content you're creating, the consumer is not only drawn into what you're saying, but really drawn into what, how you're saying it, because it's naturally conducive to the buyer engaging, and that means that they're just more likely to immerse themselves in your story. And you've got a really good story as an organization to tell. Each one of you have a really good and unique company story, and the means to deliver that story aren't always as effective, which is why we rely on a lot of sellers, arming our sellers, enabling sellers with being able to tell the company story in the best way. So much time is put into enablement, and sellers really have often relied on face-to-face engagements to really tell their organizational story. And this allows you to replicate as close to that experience in an offline and content-driven way. And right, content and conversations are how we deliver our stories. And right, in this new sort of virtual environment, the balance is tilting a little more towards content over conversations. It's just a more natural way we engage. Folks just don't engage on the phone as much anymore, right? You probably experienced it in your personal lives as well. We are very much more moving to an asynchronous form of communication. So this allows you to keep that immersive experience even when folks are consuming your content offline. And yes, functionality available on mobile devices. Awesome. And I see the question coming in around enablement program. I can connect over folks. I'll put my contact info here if anybody wants to connect with me offline. And then we'll follow up with the content from here as well. I think for some folks, slides weren't showing up, so we'll send over as a follow-up to folks. And then on the question of an enablement program, a little bit different from this topic, Jennifer. Hi, but I'll connect with you, and happy to take that conversation further as well. We know a thing or two about enablement. All right, folks, that said, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate everybody logging in, and apologies if there were some video hiccups along the way. Hopefully not, and look forward to engaging with everyone after this as well. Thank you.